Chaos Merchants is based on Tupac 187 by R.J. Bond and Michael Douglas Carlin. Take away every gun. This is no dry run. At 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Las Vegas, at the Luxor, security was all brought together by Reggie Wright on the day Tupac was shot, and we were told not to carry weapons because we were all armed. We thought it was strange. Why were we told not to carry weapons? Even cops were told not to carry their weapons. Noon. There is a meeting with 23 security personnel and attorney George Kalisis where security personnel are asked not to carry weapons. 1. Reggie Wright disarmed all security guards on the night of the shooting. This was a break from the normal protocol when guarding artists in Las Vegas. 2. Michael Moore refused the order and insisted on carrying his weapon. He was removed from guarding Tupac Shakur and was ordered to Club 662, where he was to stay close to Reggie Wright from Tupac assassination. 23 security personnel are gathered, and George Kalisis tells them that they cannot carry weapons. Subsequently, Reggie Wright Jr. gathers together security personnel a few hours before everybody goes to Club 662 to tell them that they cannot carry weapons. Michael Moore is pulled off of guarding Tupac Shakur when he refuses Reggie's order to disarm. Reggie calls him repeatedly in his room to make sure he is not guarding Tupac and that he is in his room. Then Reggie Wright keeps Moore close to him at Club 662. Moore tells of hearing, "Got him, come over Reggie's radio," followed by, "Don't say nothing over the radio." That also comes over Reggie Wright Jr.'s radio. "I was told that I was being taken off of Tupac." Reggie Wright said, "Michael Moore, do what you're told." I think the reason they removed me from Tupac was that I was one of the few people that wouldn't buy into not carrying my weapon. So they removed me off Tupac so there wouldn't be a weapon there. At 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Las Vegas at the Luxor, security was all brought together by Reggie Wright on the day that Tupac was shot, and we were told not to carry weapons because we were all armed. Everybody thought it was strange. Why were we told not to carry weapons? Even the cops were told not to carry weapons. It was very, very odd. We were also instructed to lie by Reggie Wright to Suge, and the reason we were instructed to lie was because Reggie Wright told us not to carry any weapons. Suge called the meeting. All the artists were instructed to come to this meeting, and certain security was invited, and I happened to be one of them. And prior to going into that meeting with Suge and all of the artists from Death Row, Reggie met with us out front in his own meeting and instructed us to say certain things. The meeting was about what happened. The artists were drilling security about what methods we had used and what were some of our tactics. I looked around and nobody said anything. Nobody was speaking up for security. So I was one of the few people that stood up and said, "Wait a minute. We were instructed not to carry any weapons that day." On 9/11/96, Mr. Kenner, Mr. Chesnoff, and Mr. Kalisis all said Knight would be coming to our office for an interview. It appeared to me Mr. Kalisis was not involved with Mr. Kenner or Mr. Chesnoff in the representation of Knight. In fact, there is obvious friction between Mr. Kenner and Mr. Kalisis. Could that friction have been Mr. Kalisis knowing he had become an accessory to murder? Cadillac drive-by, eye in the sky doesn't lie. The plot comes right out of the popular 1993 urban film, Menace to Society. There is an altercation, and the victims become the perpetrators. The Orlando Anderson beating establishes a motive for the killing of Tupac and Suge. It threw investigators off of sniffing into the bigger motive of the $500 million value of Death Row Records, the $51 million Lloyds of London life insurance policy on Tupac Shakur, and control of West Coast rap and hip-hop. Why pick that plot from that movie? It was a private joke. Menace to Society was the film that Tupac was hired for, but was later fired. Tupac assaulted director Allen Hughes because of his frustration at the way he was being treated. Tupac was later found guilty for assault and battery for the attack. Tupac had been set up on that movie too. According to MC8, the Hughes brothers only got financing for the movie because Tupac was attached. They knew that they didn't want to work with him, so they kept frustrating him, wanting him to quit. They knew what they were doing. They knew they was aggravating him because they wanted him to quit. Finally, Tupac became so disruptive that it came to blows. So every day it was disruption in the rehearsal. It was funny to us. We laughed, we joked, it was funny. But they were serious. Because you know them, we on a time schedule, we on a budget. So they kicked him out the movie. Boiling a murder down to a gang thing had worked for the El Rey theater beating. Why couldn't it work as the reason Tupac and Suge Knight were shot and killed? Who would dream up such an elaborate plan? The foremost rap and hip-hop criminal defense attorney and the former cop justice administration graduate who was responsible for orchestrating security that night? They certainly would have the means and motive, but did they have the opportunity? But what if the head of the gang detail at the Compton police were also involved? Turns out that Reggie Wright Sr. is on the Orlando Anderson security footage, and someone that looks just like Reggie Wright Jr. is seen escorting Orlando Anderson away from security on the night of the shooting. The man that looks exactly like Reggie Wright Jr. shakes Anderson's hand and takes him away from where he is being detained. They had control of the situation from beginning to end. It didn't even matter that Orlando Anderson had an airtight alibi. After the Tyson fight, I, Corey Edwards, went to a bar in the hotel and drank with Gucci and Stacey Augman, retired professional basketball player. That's when I saw some other friends of mine. I asked them what was going on, and they said that Baby Lane and Tupac had gotten into a fight. I looked around and saw Baby Lane standing in the corner. Me and Gucci walked up to him and asked him what had happened and if he was okay. He said that he had got into it with Tupac and Tupac's people, but that everything was cool. Baby Lane didn't appear to be injured or too upset about what happened. We walked away from him and continued to drink at the bar. There is absolutely no way that Orlando Anderson could have been the shooter that night. He was in the bar after the fight and physically could not have carried out the hit. Remember, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. Time tag 8:47:16 p.m. on September 7th, 1996. Orlando Anderson is seen walking into the crowd at the MGM. Time tag 8:49:42 p.m. on September 7, 1996. A woman reacts to something and takes refuge behind a pillar. The camera reveals the beating of Orlando Anderson. Time tag 8:49:58 p.m. on September 7th, 1996. Security guards have arrived and the beating ceases. Time tag 8:53:32 p.m. on September 7, 1996. Reggie Wright Sr. enters the screen looking at security detaining Orlando Anderson. We see him until 8:54:04. We all thought he, Reggie Wright Sr., was getting paid on the side. Time tag 8:55:22. It appears that Reggie Wright Jr. enters from the right of the screen and walks over to shake Orlando Anderson's hand and escort him away. 4 minutes after the Orlando Anderson beating, Reggie Wright Sr. is already on the scene on a fight night in Las Vegas. 5 minutes after the beating, Reggie Wright Jr. has shaken Orlando's hand and is escorting him away on the fight night in Las Vegas. I received 4 phone calls prior to Tupac getting killed. 3 of the calls came from Mr. Wright, and 1 phone call came from Al Giddens. I said, "Why are you calling me in my room at 8 if I'm not supposed to be there until 10? "Oh, Reggie just called me and told me to call you." I said, "Don't call me no more." After that, all my calls came directly from Mr. Wright. I think there was a reason for that, and the reason was making sure that no one carried a weapon. So why was Reggie Wright Jr. calling and having Michael Moore called so many times to make sure he was in his room in the minutes preceding the Orlando Anderson scuffle? Green and McCulley. They basically told me, they had a disturbance that night at the hotel there, and supposedly Baby Lane Anderson had supposedly stolen his chain, whatever, this and that, at the mall, Lakewood Mall, but a bunch of bullshit anyway. Anyhow, I talked to Frank. I said, what was going? He was all shaken up, this and that, and then he finally pulled me to the side and said, they called me out to the house there, They want me to tell the detectives because at the time no one had given any statements to the Metro PD. They wanted Frank to go ahead. Suge and Reggie called him out to the house with Chicken Bone, Neck Bone, Buntry, Alton, McDonald, Buntry, and all of the homies out there basically at the house in Vegas, and basically told Frank, to go ahead, let detectives talk to you. In fact, Kenner was out there too. Basically, go ahead and tell them, this is the guy that stole Tupac's chain. I told Frank then, I said, don't lie to them, but this is not what happened. Now, if the incident had happened, I would have known about it. And I told him then, I said, well, that is the first time I remember hearing of this. It wasn't Suge that brought down Death Row either. It was Trayvon Lane, bitch ass, said DJ Quick. Scary ass dude got that chain took and then got Tupac in there fighting. And that's how Tupac got shot. Because Trayvon Lane, he was like the little bully. He was like an instigator. It's always the one that don't mean nothing that bring the whole house of cards down. Trayvon Lane, you ought to be real proud of yourself. You was a bitch ass. And you fucked it up for everybody. Assign the blame, put Frank in the frame. Why ask Frank to lie about the Orlando Anderson chain grab incident? All of the other witnesses were convicted felons and therefore not credible. If they could get Frank Alexander compromised, they could also discredit him. Reggie told Frank to place the incident at 6:30 p.m. Frank told that lie to Brent Becker of the Las Vegas Municipal Police Department. Once it was entered into the record, Frank could easily be shown in the witness box as a liar, thereby discrediting all of his testimony. Frank Alexander said, Mr. Kenner made it seem as if I ratted everyone out, and that is why I started hearing that I was getting these death threats, because I ratted everyone out. I fingered all the players in the entourage. I think Frank had no idea that I received 4 phone calls prior to Tupac getting killed. 3 of the phone calls came from Mr. Wright, and 1 phone call came from Al Gideons, who was head of Club 662 security. I said, Al, why are you calling me at 10 after 8 if I'm not supposed to be there until 10? And his answer was, Reggie just called me and told me to call you. I said, well, don't call me no more. And then after that, all of my phone calls came from Mr. Wright. Could it be that Reggie Wright Jr. didn't want Michael Moore wandering through the MGM, bumping into Reggie Wright Sr., or others that were part of staging the Orlando incident? Frank Alexander was given the sole responsibility of guarding Tupac. Alexander intercedes in the Orlando Anderson scuffle and detains Tupac. His responsibility is to protect Tupac. The Orlando Anderson scuffle was being billed as a beating. The El Rey Theater, where Kelly Jamerson was stomped, pummeled, hit with bottles, kicked and punched, that was a beating. Frank is unarmed and riding behind Tupac and Suge in a black Lexus. When shots ring out, there is virtually nothing he can do but watch. But Frank becomes a larger part of the controversy because of what he reportedly says to investigators about the Orlando Anderson scuffle. Frank gives 2 statements to Brent Becker on the night of the shooting. He gives a more detailed report on October 1st, where he lies about Orlando Anderson snatching at Tupac's chain. Reggie had asked him to tag that event at 6:30 p.m. on the night of the shooting and scuffle with Orlando Anderson. But that isn't the statement that gets entered into the official record for Suge's probation violation hearing. The statement that gets entered into the court record comes from the Compton Police Department. It is no coincidence that Reggie Wright Sr. is at the Orlando Anderson beating. The scuffle was staged to violate Suge on his probation if he couldn't be killed that night, and Frank Alexander was set up to be the fall guy. You snitched on them. Moore tells Alexander that his life is now in danger from the Death Row Records people. Frank Alexander becomes the distraction to keep Suge from knowing that he is being played. While Suge is focusing on Frank Alexander, he isn't paying attention to the details of the case. They are able to enter Frank Alexander's statement about Suge kicking Orlando Anderson through Compton Police without ever having him testify. You never would have gotten this involved if they didn't give up your name. If David Kenner and them wouldn't have been trying to subpoena you and get you down there. Michael Moore, some of this is y'all's fault. Reggie, what do you mean? Michael Moore, if you guys wouldn't have tricked him down there, tricked him down to the courthouse, got his name all over everything, he wouldn't have been down there. What did Reggie say? Well, the thing was they was trying to use you too. See, that's what they were doing. They were using you for their advantage. That's just the bottom line. That's what they was doing. On November 19, 1996, Frank Alexander calls David Kenner and presses him to know which of the reports the information came from. He cites the 2 reports from the night of the Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight shooting and the subsequent report with Brent Becker. Kenner answers, the one that came up was a Compton Police Department report. I informed Reggie that I wasn't taking my weapon off for no one. My gun did not belong to Right Way. I was told that I was being taken off of Tupac. Reggie Wright said, Michael Moore, do what you're told. Artists not getting paid for the songs they made? Who's being played? Confession letter indicates that Reggie Wright Jr. selected Lil Half Dead to murder Tupac Shakur because of a previous interaction between Lil Half Dead and Tupac where Tupac stole a song from him. Look at the album cover for Lil Half Dead's Dead Serious, where you will see a slumped over dead Tupac at Can-Am Studios. See photos below. Sampling and theft appear to have been a common practice in the early roots of rap music. It's a web link. Watch from 3 minutes in. Also, TupacLegacy.net. Bay rapper claims Tupac stole his concept for a song. The history of the music industry is a history of theft, and that is all very big business. The group Blurred Lines, their record label, and the publishing company earned over $24 million from the theft of music from Marvin Gaye. Led Zeppelin is one of the most rumored bands to steal names, lyrics, and riffs in the process of creating their music. Why are we to think that hip-hop and rap would be any different? The confession letter says that demo stealing was a major problem. In a recent interview, Suge Knight said, "Rest in peace, Eazy-E. One thing about Eric told me one day, I thought Andre did all the music, all the beats. You know what Eric told me? People sent their demos in. Andre redo them. We redo the raps. That's the song. I took that same get down. So basically, I took it from Eazy and did the same shit. I took that from Eazy. And guess what? Jimmy Iovine sent me to prison and stole it from me." Suge Knight was being asked about checks coming to Death Row Records' P.O. Box, and he said he was more interested in the demo tapes that. So was there any evidence that Tupac also stole music? There is. February 21, Tupac releases Dear Mama during his incarceration. The single sold over 7 million copies during the time Tupac was in prison. It was the most successful single on the album, Me Against the World. There was a claim that the concept for the song was created by rapper Kill Kill and stolen by Tupac. Kill Kill, a rapper from Watts, claims that his concept for Mama Dear was stolen by Tupac when he recorded Dear Mama. The song Here We Go One Time confirms that a rapper who has his song stolen might be mad enough to commit murder. Lil Half Dead met Tupac Shakur at the Bonaventure Hotel, where he gave Tupac his demo tape of 4 songs. 3 months later, Brenda's Got a Baby, a song written by Lil Half Dead, was released by Tupac. In Reno, Lil Half Dead confronted Tupac about the songs that were taken, and Tupac's soldiers beat Lil Half Dead down. Lil Half Dead was sponsored by Suge Knight, and he was sold off to Priority Records. According to Tony Green, Tupac would take all of the tracks that was laying around and just start cutting on them. Donald Smith, aka Lil Half Dead, was the alleged triggerman on September 7, 1996, responsible for killing Tupac Shakur. Smith is the cousin of Calvin Brodus, aka Snoop Dogg. Smith was represented by Suge Knight and Death Row Records, and his contract was sold off to Priority Records. He had given a demo tape to Tupac, and 2 of his songs were stolen by Tupac, according to the confession letter. Theft in the hip-hop world was a common practice at that time. Smith is affiliated with the Long Beach Crips. Snoop Dogg, Donald Smith's cousin, tells sheriff's deputies on May 14, 1998, that Suge Knight was behind the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur. Was this to throw law enforcement off the trail of his cousin? When you look at the cover of Dead Serious by Lil Half Dead, there is a picture of a murdered Tupac at Can-Am Studios. From this interview, you could see that Half Dead is Snoop's enforcer. Especially check out the closing paragraph. Escobar300.wordpress.com. Classic Snoop Dogg interview. Disses Ja Rule. Talks about East Coast biting the West Coast. Tupac punking Nas. Speaks on Nas Tupac. Donald Smith, a.k.a. Lil Half Dead, was the alleged triggerman on September 7th, 1996, responsible for killing Tupac Shakur. Smith is the cousin of Calvin Brodus, a.k.a. Snoop Dogg. Smith was represented by Suge Knight and Death Row Records, and his contract was sold off to Priority Records. He had given a demo tape to Tupac, and 2 of his songs were stolen by Tupac, according to the confession letter. Theft in the hip-hop world was a common practice at that time. Smith is affiliated with the Long Beach Crips. When you look at the cover of Dead Serious by Lil Half Dead, there is a picture of a murdered Tupac at Can-Am Studios. From this interview, you could see that Half Dead is Snoop's enforcer. Especially check out the closing paragraph. Escobar300.wordpress.com, classic Snoop Dogg interview. This is Ja Rule. Talks about East Coast biting the West Coast, Tupac punking Nas, etc. Speaks on Nas Tupac. These are the footnotes. 269. Confession letter and statement from Chris Blatchford given to Michael Carlin and Russell Poole. Interview of Corey Edwards on June 9, 1997 by Detective Golas. Russell Poole tape-recorded interview with Death Row Dave on February 6, 2014. Russell Poole tape-recorded interview with Death Row Dave on February 6, 2014. Michael Moore interview from Tupac Conspiracy directed by R.J. Bond. Las Vegas Metro Continuation Report number 960907-2063. MC8 praises Kendrick Lamar, recalls DJ Quick's clever line, and Tupac's Menace to Society days by Paul Arnold. Interview of Corey Edwards on June 9, 1997 by Detective Golas. Russell Poole interview with Death Row Dave. Footnote 279. Kevin Hackey interview with LAPD detectives Miller and Poole 5/12/1998. DJ Quick interview with XXLMag.com October 28, 2013. Frank Alexander interview by Brent Becker on March 19, 1997. Michael Moore interview from Tupac Conspiracy directed by R.J. Bond. Michael Moore says to Frank Alexander on his secretly recorded telephone conversations. Michael Moore conversation with Frank Alexander on Frank Alexander's secretly recorded telephone conversations. Michael Moore interview from Tupac Conspiracy directed by R.J. Bond. Confession letter to the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur. Suge Knight interview on YouTube. Listen to Kill Kill's song on YouTube. Confession letter to the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur. Tony Green, a.k.a. T-Money, interview regarding Tupac Shakur. Footnote 291. Brent Becker interview with Frank Alexander and R.J. Bond. Chris Blatchford statement given to Russell Poole. Russell Poole interview with Death Row Dave. Michael Moore tells Frank on Frank Alexander's secret tape recordings of his telephone conversations. This concludes Chaos Merchants Part 7. Join us for Part 8. Subscribe to be notified.